At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Here in Greenville County, we have 8 different places where a 911 call can be answered.
It is the largest county in South Carolina. It's a challenge.
The type of information that a telecommunicator gets from Radius Plus is location-based technology. You can see where the caller is, if they have a medical issue, if they speak a different language. They're immediately able to text to that caller in their native language. It reduces response times because it immediately gets first responders where they need to be.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, Rapid Deploy, as well as Carbine, and a big shout out to patrons, as always, for everything. Thank you so very much. It has been, this past week was pretty awesome, and we're gonna go through some of that here. Shortly, but there's so much stuff that's going on. As I've said in the last few episodes, we're full on conference season, so I'm going to be in different places, and this episode is actually going to be going out pretty fast as well. So you're listening to the most recent one, because I have another conference that I'll be heading out to. It's going to be the Texas Public Safety Conference in Galveston, and it is an excellent one. I've only been there once, but that one time, it just, like with other places, it felt like family already. It was really good going in there. I did Imagine Listening. I did the podcast, recorded a bunch of episodes, and I will be doing the exact same thing next week. It'll be April, I think, 3rd through the 6th is the entire conference. I'll be heading out there. I'll be at booth 126, and you can stop in there, and please do so. Say hello to myself, as well as my special guest, which will be Sarah Weston, who is the executive director and founder of 911 Wonder Women, Inc., an amazing nonprofit. And we're going to be doing 3 giveaways, and there's some awesome lights that Mike Aurora put together, of Aurora Design, out of Texas as well, and you will see them over there. Also, April 4th will be when I do Imagine Listening, and that'll be at 3:30 p.m. Central Time. I'll be doing that for an hour, and it is going to be a good one. So we hope to see you out there. It is going to be excellent, and I am super excited for my guest today. We just talked about this, I think, this past Friday on when we're going to do this episode, and here we are. Again, we are fresh back from a trip from last week, and my guest today is Juliet Brown. She's a senior supervisor at Westcom Regional Dispatch out of Massachusetts. Hey, yo.
Hi.
Hey.
It's great to be here.
Oh, it is great to have you. Looking at your screen, like everything in the background, this looks amazing. Just like the color combination alone is so just uplifting and bright. Like, if you look at mine in the back, I've got what people have said, this spaceship here, which is my screen printing press. But, it's kind of blah back there. I like yours. I need to do something more like that.
Thanks. Our walls used to be beige,
Mhm.
And then I was like, this is boring. So we found this like bright blue for the living room. My kitchen's actually hot pink.
Oh, no
And
way.
yeah, it's life's too short to have boring colored walls.
Damn right. Amen to that. I'm all about that. See, yep, I need to change some of my stuff up here. And the gnome that's in back of you looks super awesome too.
Yeah, my cousin got me that for Christmas. She was like, it would just fit in your living room. And I was like, it would. So,
Oh man, that is great. Well, in your intro and everything in your title, I also wanted to mention that Juliet is also the first recipient of the fireworks scholarship that was given out by 911 Wonder Women Inc. And we were all at the Mayan Ranch that's put on by Joe Serio of the 360 Degree Dispatch, which he sponsored a part of that as well. Your spot that was there, and then Within the Trenches Media did the travel part. So all of us together combined. I mean, it was an excellent time and a unique experience. And just really quick, without going into a lot of detail, because we're going to get into that a little bit later after we hear more about your story. But what was that like for you?
it was easily the most thought-provoking week of my life. I felt like everything that I was being taught and everything that we were talking about was challenging myself in like the best way possible.
Oh man, see, that's excellent. Very well put. I felt the same way with a lot of things. Was sitting in back with the speaker group, but just watching everyone participate and get into what every speaker was saying. Especially during Nathan Lee from the Denise Amber Lee
Mhm.
Foundation during his session, it was just all very, very well done and a good time, and highly recommend it if no one has ever gone to the ranch before. But before we get into further information on that and some of the things that we did there and such in our experience, I want to learn more about you. So you have been in public safety for about 7.5 years now, right?
Correct.
All right. How did you get into it to begin with? Did you just kind of fall in? Because you heard some of my story as well while we were
Yeah.
out there at the ranch. So did you kind of fall in like I did, or do you come from a public safety family?
So I don't really come from a public safety family, but my family is very pro-military, very pro-first responder. We do a lot of volunteer work with our local military base. But I remember when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I was watching Cops with my Grammy, and I said to her, I want to be a police officer. And she was like, you do? And I was like, yeah, but I'm not running through backyards in the dark because that seems dangerous. And she was like, well, I don't think you got a choice. And I was like, well, then I don't want to be a police officer.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
that was my entire career as a police officer, about 6 minutes when I was about 7 years old. Um, but ever since then, I wanted to do something in first responder land, as I call
Mhm.
it, without really knowing what it was. When I was 20, I got my EMT license,
Mhm.
and I did one ride shift, and the person that I was with got thrown up on. And I was like, nope, not doing this either. Um, and then just after my 21st birthday, I was hired in a dispatch center that dispatches EMS for the third largest city in our state. And I haven't looked back since.
Oh, wow. So
Yep.
so you have those early ambitions. So it was, what did you say,
Yes.
about 6 minutes?
Yeah, about 6
Is all
minutes.
it was. And then, EMT style and everything, and watching one of your partners there get vomited on. That's got to be, yeah. That's definitely an eye opener when you
Yep.
see it happen, probably almost in slow motion. You're like, oh no, throwing your arms up like, not on
Yeah.
me.
No.
And then things ended up switching up. So then, when you get into dispatch, like, even the kind of the hiring process, because I mean, getting your EMT license and everything else, you're hearing the stuff that's going on the radio on your end. So did that spark some curiosity as well? Like, I wonder what it's like in there. And also, on top of that, did you get a chance to do any type of sit along or anything?
I did not get any type of sit along. I really only the ride shift that I did, I hadn't even gotten hired by a department yet. It was just
Mhm.
like through my EMT class. So I still, even after getting my EMT license, had really zero concept of what dispatch was and what dispatch is. Which I feel like a lot of first responders have that.
Mhm.
Even though they have like they go through the police academy, the fire academy, unless you make them sit in dispatch, they still have zero idea what we do.
I fully agree, because when I was in dispatch, there were a lot of guys who would come up and or they would even call up and say, "Man, you guys aren't doing anything. You're just answering the phone and this and that." Like, why don't you bring your ass up here and
Mhm.
sit with us for a little while? And there was one time that I remember that we were getting our asses handed to us during a bad storm. There's trees, wires, poles down everywhere. And they were calling up for certain things, or they were calling on the radio, and we had to keep saying stand by,
Mhm.
unless it was a traffic stop or anything, high emergency or whatever. Of course we would take them on, but a lot of times we couldn't talk to them because that's how bad it
Mhm.
wasn't in there. So two officers, a deputy and a city officer, ended up coming up to help us. They lasted an hour, and they were like, hell no. Like, this is what you guys are doing, this is what you because they're like, you gotta
Mhm.
listen to everything and do this and this and this and this. I'm like, yeah, and
Yep.
this and this and this and this. It continues, man. It doesn't stop. So
It
yeah,
does
after that hour, they were donezo. They
not.
didn't want to deal with it anymore. But towards the end of my dispatch career out there at the center that I was working at, the sheriff's department, they were doing a lot more sit-alongs for some of their
Mhm.
newer folks so that they would know what it was like on our side, and actually kind of helped out in bridging that gap on what it is actually like. As you were saying, with a lot of first responders, they don't know what us as first responders do when we're answering phones.
Yeah, we're actually my center that I'm at now is a newly regionalized center.
Mhm.
So even the like departments that knew their dispatch centers before don't really understand all the added things that we do as a regional center.
Mhm.
So they try to get all of their new officers into dispatch for at least 4 hours to just sit
Nice.
with us, talk with us, learn about us, see what we're doing, all that fun stuff.
See, I fully agree with that, and that is really good to do something like that as well. The only thing is that kind of sucks though is if it's 4 hours when there's pretty much nothing going on, and then they're just, oh, okay, this is what you guys do, and you're like, no, that's not
Yeah.
what we do, man.
It always happens that when an officer somebody's observing, like, the phones just stop ringing, and you're like, "Well, usually" but, like, you don't wanna be like, "Well, it's not usually this quiet because you can't say the Q word in
Right,
dispatch."
right.
So
You
you're
can't say
like,
that.
"Ah!"
Damned if you do, damned if you don't, man.
Yep.
Yeah, it sucks. When you first start out, then was it overwhelming at all? Like, do you remember walking in and seeing everything? And the reason I ask is because I sometimes, when I talk to folks on the podcast, I flash back to my first day in the last center that I was at, walking in and seeing all the consoles and everyone working like crazy, and me thinking, am I gonna be able to do this? Like, this looks pretty gnarly. Like, I don't know. So what was it like for you when you're walking in? What is it that you're seeing?
It was so the first center that I worked at,
Hmm.
they kind of really shell shocked me into dispatch, just because it was so busy. It was a major city, so we had, like, shootings, stabbings, everything like that, and I remember one of my first shifts, I couldn't answer 911s yet. I couldn't really do, like, much of anything, and it was blowing up, and I felt so bad because I literally, like, could do my one little thing in the corner, like, that I was trained to do, um, and the girl across from me, her name was is Dana.
Mhm.
I was to this day, I still think back of this, and she watches this. Dana, I'm still thoroughly impressed by this. She actually gave CPR instructions to two people at the same time. Like, she had, like, 2 phones and was, like, giving CPR instructions, like, she was, like, counting with, like, both because it was just so busy, and there was, like, multiple CPR calls and everything, and she had to put one CPR call on hold to pick up another one, and it was also a CPR call.
Oh,
So,
man.
like, the first person she started and got them doing chest compressions, put them on hold, went to the second person, got them doing chest compressions, and then monitored both phones and encouraged both people to keep going.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Man, that's got like I'm all like anxious and stuff. Like
Yeah.
that is
Um,
something else because a CPR call is those are always something else. Even when you get to the point where they are doing just compressions over and over and over until somebody
mhm.
gets there and you're counting with them, it's still nerve wracking because this is a person's life and you're helping their friend, a
Yeah.
family member, even maybe a stranger who has called, um, and they found somebody who was unconscious or whatever, and you're doing CPR with them. It's all nerve wracking, and you're just
Yeah.
hoping the whole time that everything will work out. But to do two at the same time, like going back and forth, man,
It was thoroughly impressive.
it sounds like it. Afterwards,
Yeah.
I would have been like, all right, that's my time. I'm out. I did my 2 CPR calls for the day. I'm done.
Yep.
Oh, but it's 911 and it doesn't work that way. You go on
Nope.
to the next one. You keep going. Oh man, that's crazy. So how long was the training, and also what was the training like for you? Because as you said, you didn't have that experience or anything. You didn't get a chance to do a sit along to
Mhm.
begin with, but you kind of, if anything, had the radio part that you could
Yeah.
hear on the other end up until that point.
So they started me out on radios because I didn't have my EMD cert, so my
Hmm.
emergency medical dispatch. So I couldn't really take any 911s because we only did medical. Um, so I started in December. Um, and then in January I got my EMD cert. Well, I took the class for it.
Hmm.
And then I actually call this an omen. I started taking 911s on February 13th. Friday the 13th.
Oh no.
Yep. Um, it's probably why I'm a ship magnet. Um, and the next day I was off training.
What?
Yeah. I had a trainer sit with me for one day. Um, and the next day I was off training. Um, And yeah, so the only real classroom time I had was my 3 days of EMD, which the instructor was not great.
Hmm.
In that I remember our second day, we were going over scenarios and practicing like what would happen if we took 911s and what we would say and all that. And it was my turn. And the one thing that I hated most in school was talking in class. Like, I was always a quiet, shy person. Um, Actually, as a side note, when I got hired in dispatch, my dad was like, "Julie, you can't even order a pizza. How are you gonna answer 911?" Um,
Right, you're like, thanks,
so,
Dad.
like, I was that shy, and I was like, "I don't know, dad. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out." But so the second day, we're going over the scenarios, and it's my turn, and I read through everything, but I'm super nervous. I'm, like, shaking, and he says to me, "You don't got it, kid. If you were in my center, I wouldn't have you answer 911s. You don't got it."
What?
Yep. Um,
Okay.
And
How did that, like, what was your reaction then? Like,
so, like, I'm only like newly 21, 5'3", little female, like sitting there. And here's this like 6'2", 50-year-old man being like, "You don't got it. Sorry." So I just kind of like stared at him and was like, because like I didn't even know what to say. And he said it like in front of the entire class and everybody's just staring at me. And I was like, uh, um, so yeah, I just kinda, like, blankly
what?
stared at him and didn't know what to say. Um, Sometimes I
Holy.
actually think about looking him up and calling him and being like, "Ha! I do have it!" But, like,
Right. Yeah. Because you've been doing
that
it
would
for
be really counterproductive, but
probably, but maybe, if you saw the person just, out of nowhere at a conference or something and be like, remember me?
yeah.
I'm the senior supervisor now.
Yeah. Um, yeah, but
You
yeah.
ever wonder if he was saying that on purpose to kind of light a fire under you at all?
Um,
Or he
I
was just being a
maybe,
dick?
but, like, I feel like if that's what he was doing, he didn't go about it correctly
Oh,
because all it did was embarrass me in front of this class of 30 kids.
oh man. Yeah.
Like, all it did was, like, make me turn, like, beet red, and, like, for the rest of the class, I didn't say anything. I didn't include myself in any conversations. I just kinda, like, sat there, like, here's this guy that's known me for 9 hours, and he
Mhm.
says that I don't got it, like,
Dang.
yeah.
See, that definitely is part of that old guard that is now going out of there. Folks who
Mhm.
are, just trying to lead in a way, I guess, and teach through, I don't know, shame, embarrassing
Yeah.
comments, whichever, to see if it'll light a fire. And sometimes people are just jerks because you hear that phrase of we eat our young and everything, and that's
Mhm.
that's definitely one of those right there. So I guess after that time, then there had to have been something that and maybe you didn't recognize it right off the bat, but I mean, you're still here 7.5 years later from that comment.
Mhm.
And I mean, did it light a fire? And was it in the back of your head like, man, you're not going to talk to me like I'm going to show you, like, even though
Yeah,
you kind of stayed quiet, made you think a little more and be like, I'm going to show this person, like, I can do this.
it did light a fire a little bit,
Hmm.
but then my first 911 I ever took, I royally messed up, and, it kinda, like, validated what he had said, um, so then I felt like, "Wow, maybe I really can't do this."
Hmm.
Um, and then in that same day, that I was training, I actually, yelled at my first person. So
Oh,
after that, I was like, "I got this. I can yell at people. It's fine."
right, because there's a lot of times when you've got people who are calling in and they're being hysterical, they're arguing with somebody else, you sometimes got to raise your voice and
Yeah,
take control of that call, as long as you're doing it in not a like derogatory manner. you're
yeah,
you're you're doing it to get control of that call. That is okay. Because sometimes people need to hear that. There are other times when people are just yelling and yelling and yelling and yelling, and anything that you're saying, whether you go high, go try to go higher than them or whichever, it's just background noise. And
yeah.
then you got to bring your voice down to a whisper to try to trick them, to make them think there's nobody there so that they stop. But there's so many different variables that go into these conversations, right? And we learn after call after call after call how to deal with certain callers, and you can tell almost right away, right off the bat, when they start talking to you, you're like, okay, I need to talk this way with this person so that they
Mhm.
understand me.
Yep.
It's a crazy thing.
That it is.
So you get through that training,
Yep.
and then and you come out and everything, and you start taking, well, you're on the radio, right? So how did that how did that start out then, just on the radio? Because there's a lot of things too when you start out on the radio, especially if you're starting first, out on the radio, you gotta learn all these different codes. You gotta,
Mhm.
you really have to dial in, even like you're typing, or if you're doing like short form typing or something, to be able to keep up with a lot of traffic stops and everything else that's coming in. Um, so for that one though, just so that I know this correctly, you did all three disciplines, or you only did
No, we
medical?
only did EMS at my
Only
first
did
center.
EMS. Okay.
Yeah.
So even with that, even with just doing just EMS, when you're on the radio, and I'm speaking from experience only because when I got onto radio, I wanted to know exactly how to say things, how my
Mhm.
trainer wanted, because I just wanted to do a good job. So like it was so stupid because even sometimes all I would need to say is 10-4, but I would look back at my trainer and be like, just 10-4, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, 10-4. It sounds so stupid, right? It sounds so easy, but
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know. And you
Mhm.
just you want to make sure you're saying it to the point that people understand. So then what was that like for you jumping on there?
Um, so my main trainer when I was on radio, was this kid, Jeff,
Hmm.
and, actually worked with Jeff almost every day for my 2 years there. He was great. But one of the things he said to me was, "Your crews are going to be mad at you. They're going to think that you're being unfair, that maybe there was an ambulance that was closer, that, um, they're going to think that you're messing up even if you're not, and they're going to be mad at you because the last thing that they want to do is go to another call." And he's like, "But fuck them, send them to the call and send them with confidence."
There you go.
Yep,
That's awesome. Because
yep,
that definitely sticks with you, right? I mean,
mhm,
obviously, it's with you now. It's 7.5 years later. You've been doing this and everything, and that's good to hear stuff like that too, because you have to have that type of confidence over the radio when
mhm,
people are listening. Because if they're listening and you're just kind of piddling through it and uhing and umming and everything else, you're like, okay, come on, like there's and then there's a lot of times, and maybe you've heard this before as well, but I remember a lot of officers and even sergeants and such, those in charge, would send a message and say, "Man, I heard your voice over the radio, and I knew we were going to be all right. Like I knew we were going to
mhm,
be okay because you and your crew, you know your shit, and we trust that you know your shit, and you dispatch with confidence," is basically what they would
yeah,
say. So that's always a good thing. Otherwise, it kind of makes everybody nervous and they might be shitty
mhm,
on the radio and you're like, why are you being shitty?
yeah, we are as dispatchers, we are the line of safety. We're the first, backup for the people on the road. So if we
Mhm.
don't speak confident and have confidence in ourselves, then it makes them wiggy.
Yes, exactly. I like how you put that. Wiggy. But it's true. It is
Yeah.
very true. And that's how we build that relationship between, us and those out in the field and everything. And it's always good to have that type of relationship, because otherwise, you got
Mhm,
people who are just being crappy over the radio and you're trying to get control of things that are going on, and then people start self-dispatching themselves. You're like, that's my
mhm.
job. You're not taking my job.
Yeah.
So with some of those medicals, what were when you first started out, do you remember some of those earlier calls? Because and I have to applaud you for the time that you did that, because I enjoyed taking phone calls. I enjoyed all three disciplines.
Mhm.
However, having to take medicals all day, man, I don't know. That that would be something else. I need to have a little bit of, dogs barking or other things going on law enforcement wise. I mean, I did great at medicals and everything. It just I don't know that I could do it all day. So I applaud you.
Thanks. So I actually remember my first call, very well. And I try to remember it when I'm training people that are struggling.
Mhm.
So my first call, it was a visiting nurse that was calling, and the patient was having difficulty breathing. And I probably had more difficulty breathing than the patient. I was
Oh.
like taking the call, and I'm like stuttering on the phone, and I'm like, oh my God, I sound like an idiot. And this EMD instructor was right. Like, I can't take 911s.
Mhm.
And partway through the call, she literally says, honey, are you new? And my face just goes white. And I look at my trainer, and my trainer's like shaking their head, like, say no, say no, say no. And like, just like in sheer panic, I just kind of laugh. And I'm like, I'm like, actually, ma'am, this is my first 911. And my trainer's like looking at me like, why the F would you say that?
Right.
And she was so kind. And she was literally like, well, you're doing great. Keep going.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Even though I was
awesome.
like definitely like hyperventilating on this call. And usually like people that take calls from other like visiting nurses, doctors and stuff, the last thing they want to do is listen to like your exit instructions at the end,
Yeah.
because it's just like put away any pets, gather their medications and stuff that they all know. So
Right.
like legally we're supposed to say it, but the nurses and the doctors and stuff, often they're busy, they don't want to listen to it. She very intently listened to all of my exit instructions, and then before we hung up said good luck.
Oh man.
Yep, so that was my first 911 call.
That's pretty awesome. I love that the person was like, you're doing a good job. Like,
Yeah.
the encouragement was going back and forth. That is
Yeah.
good. You don't always hear stuff like that, but you're right. When there are certain people that don't want to hear those exit instructions, because especially like if I think I remember there was one time I was on a medical and I was giving those instructions. I was like, make sure the doors are unlocked and this and that. And then I stopped for a moment. And I was like, you guys are outside right now. Don't worry about that one. They'll see you.
Yeah.
Because you get so into the call, right? And going through those cards and reading everything you're supposed to be reading, especially if someone is going to be doing quality assurance on those calls. You want to make sure you have each one of those so that you get your points and then you don't get a bad review on the call. So you're going through, and then sometimes like that, like me, you miss the fact that, oh, you don't have to have the doors unlocked because their asses are outside. There's no doors to open or lock or unlock.
Yeah.
Oh,
The other thing is like with other medical professionals, they know what they have to do and they know the instructions. So even though like legally we're supposed to be giving them and we have to give them, they're like, I don't have time for this. I know this. I need to get the patient ready to go to the hospital.
yeah. Well, and then if you have the chance that they end up hanging up on you too, then it's a 911 hang up. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
now I got to call you back.
Just to give you your exit instructions.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Oh man, there's so many variables. It's so funny sometimes. So those were all medicals and everything. So how long were you there before you made your switch over to Westcom Regional?
So I've actually Westcom's my fourth center.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I was there for 2 years.
Mhm.
And then I was at a like campus police public safety full time for about 2 years. I'm still per diem there because I just love everybody there and I love the environment. And then from there, I went to a super small town municipality for about a year. And I love everyone there too, but it was one of those centers that like, oh, in 15 years, I might get off midnight shift. Like there
Yeah.
was nothing and nowhere for me to go. and I was taking an average of 0 calls a night. Um, sometimes the first call would be the news at 5 a.m. seeing if anything happened overnight. And you're like, well, I've been here for 6 hours and you're my first phone call.
Yeah. Yeah, those are horrible sometimes because and I know I've mentioned this many times, but people used to ask how things are going in dispatch, and I would say, well, they've been kind of slow, things have been kind of boring. And they would say, well, isn't that a good thing? Like, how dare you say something like that? Like, you want people to be hurt or having to call you? I'm like, no, I don't wish that on anyone. I just, that's my job. I'm there to help
Yeah.
people. So I want to be busy and put my skills to use to help those in
Mhm.
need. So, not a lot of people understand that. So, with you saying, you would have that one call from the news and then you're just kind of
Mhm.
sitting there. Of course, you would want to go to a different place that has, more traffic, but also more opportunities and everything because you're now a senior supervisor there where you're at.
Mhm.
And I want to touch on that here a little bit in a moment. But when you made your transition over to Westcom, what was the difference in I guess, kind of the area that you were covering and, the call volume and about how many people are working at the same time as you?
So I went from a center where when I worked midnights, there was only me. I was the only person in the entire police station on midnight shift. Yep.
Oh, man.
Yep. So like literally, I remember there was one day that there was a really bad accident and I really had to pee. And the officer, he like if I had to go to the bathroom, the officer had to come in off the road and sit for me so I could go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Um, so he comes in off the road to go sit for me, and right as he's walking in, the phone rings, and I pick it up really quick, and it's a fatal car accident. So they have to shut down the highway. It's like all hands on deck, everything like that. So then, like 3 hours later, I still have to pee, and they still have the highway shut down, and I'm like, so I key up to the sergeant, and I'm like, "Can anybody come back to this station?" And he realized that, like, I never got to pee, like, 3 hours ago, and he was like, "Oh, sorry, somebody will be there soon."
Oh,
And, like,
no.
somebody came back so I could, like, go to the bathroom, and then they had to, like, go back out and block the road again, but, um, yeah.
So, meanwhile, they get there and you're, like, limping to go to the bathroom
Yeah.
because you're in pain. Oh,
Yeah.
man. Yeah,
Um,
that that's crazy.
yeah. So then I went from that to the center I'm at now. And we're a newly regionalized center.
Mhm.
So before 2019, our center didn't exist. Um, yeah. It was all like these individual police and fire departments that were dispatching for themselves.
Mhm.
And then they start like because they're starting regionalization in our state. So when I first started, we only dispatched one police department, and there was 3 dispatchers in the room at a time. And then now we dispatch 3 years later, not even. Um, we dispatch 5 police and fire departments, and on days there's 6 of us.
Mhm.
On the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, there's 7 of us. And on midnights, there's 5 of us on shift.
Oh, man. So how has that changed for you then in the, I guess logistically with everyone working at the same time, the call volume, and now doing all 3 disciplines? Was there anything that surprised you or was it actually, I don't know, I guess kind of refreshing in a way to have more people there where before it's you and whatever ghost might be in the empty police department?
Oh, actually, it's funny you say that because that police station is haunted
Oh, no
and it
way.
would freak me out. I'll tell that story after.
Okay, okay.
Um, so I really like having other people to work with.
Mhm.
I tend to be like I'm really talkative, I find. I like talking to people. So I really struggled on midnight shift with 0 calls a night, having no one to talk to for 8 hours. Um, Bless the officer that worked the same rotation as me. I used to text him and be like, "Can you come into the station?" And like have him come in just so I could tell him a story because I'm like, I'm exploding. I need somebody to talk to. Like, I can't sit here in silence for 8 hours.
Right.
Um, I'd also I'd I'd make him watch 90 Day Fiance with me.
Oh, that is great.
Corey, if you're listening, I'm sorry.
You say this, and I had a similar relationship with one of the officers I used to work with. His name was Hank, and I would work midnight shift. This is when I first started dispatching in the small police department. I was by myself for 8 hours, and when there was nothing going on at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, I would have my let's see, during that time the PlayStation 2 had just come out, I think it was,
Mm.
and I had jokingly said to the chief of police, um, it would be awesome if I brought in my video game system to make sure that I'm able to stay awake, you know? And I was laughing, and he goes, "If that's what's gonna help you, please do so. If coffee isn't working anymore, do it." And I was
Oh,
like, "What?" And he goes, "As long as you're doing your work and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and being responsible because you are an adult, then do what you got to do." So when there was nothing going on, and the officer would come in for like a cup of coffee or something to chill for a couple of minutes, we'd be playing like Street Fighter, sitting there.
nice.
It was the funniest thing, man. Um, but so the police department, it was haunted.
Yes. Um, so there was a in early 2000s,
Hmm.
there was a officer that had actually committed suicide in the basement.
Whoa.
Yeah. So he was a friendly ghost.
Hmm.
But like at 3 in the morning, like sometimes lights would flicker or like I'd be the only person in the building and I could hear him like walking around the building.
Oh, no
And
way.
like you could hear like his keys and stuff. Yeah, so it's kind of freaky, but like I would say like at one point, like one of my friends was like, "Well, just talk to him." Right? So and like I really didn't believe in like spirits or ghosts up until this point, but
Hmm.
now I'm like not sure because like I'd be like, okay, and I'd say his name, and I'd be like, okay, you're I appreciate you keeping watch, but you're kind of freaking me out. If you could stop, and then he would like stop, and I wouldn't hear it anymore. And then I'm like, do I be more scared now or less scared?
Right. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, and
dude.
that's when I would text Corey and be like, come visit me.
That's
The ghost
craziness.
is walking around. And they'd be
There
like, "He's a friendly ghost. It's one of our own." And I'm like, "I know, but it's freaking me out."
Yeah, there have been a few people that I've spoken to who have had similar stories where and one of them was in a courthouse, and it was, a lot of crazy stuff going on there, but also this jail, because there was like a tunnel that goes underneath from the jail to
Mhm.
the courthouse, and they were going out there and they saw like this green light. And a couple of my coworkers from the company that I used to work for were talking to me about it. They're like, "Yeah, man, you don't want to go over there." So I asked the director, who's also a friend, and she goes, "Oh yeah, the place is completely haunted. You want to come over sometime?" I'm like, "I don't know. Like, the horror genre is my favorite ever. I like being
Mhm.
scared and stuff like that, but man, I don't know." Oh, that is craziness.
Yeah.
So you end up, going through this whole journey and everything. You've been through lots of training and different experiences with, different setups in dispatch centers, whether it be just you by yourself all the time and going through all of that, or having been in a bigger spot where there are more people that are working, call volume is a lot higher, different call types, all this other stuff, but you end up moving on to be a senior supervisor. So I have to ask, because it seems like a lot of people have kind of something similar. But
Mhm.
when moving up into a position, was there something that happened, maybe a phone call that you took, or, maybe something to do with your training that kind of pushed you to want to move up in public safety and what you're doing?
Well, that's a loaded question.
Or it could be that you just simply wanted to do something more for yourself,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean, I
better
I
opportunities.
do want to obviously like do more for myself and move
Hmm.
up in the world. But I'm super passionate about training and making sure that my trainees get everything that they deserve out of training. I frequently, when I have people struggling, try to remember how scared I was when I took that first 911. I try to remember how that EMD instructor told me that I don't have it. And I just try to I really want to uplift all the people that I work with to be the best they can be. But unless we build the space for them to be the best and give them the tools to be the best,
Hmm.
then they're not necessarily going to get there as quickly. So I just try to, I call it, it's kind of bad, but I call it shitting rainbows. I just try to I just try to project positivity in whatever form, in whatever space I'm able to.
Hmm.
Um, and even if it comes out ugly, it's positive. Shitting rainbows.
I love that. I have to make a t-shirt that says shitting rainbows.
Yeah, shit rainbows. Well, because I don't I don't necessarily always know what I'm doing, and I don't, everybody makes mistakes, and it doesn't always come out as picture perfect, pretty positivity as I want it to, but at that time, it's the only way I knew how. So it's positive and it's great, but it's shit. No, it's not shit. Like it's not exactly getting out in the most what's the word I'm looking for? In the most pretty way?
Right. No, I understand. It
Just
it's
yeah.
almost it's almost like the picture that is to, I believe, is gonna be your right. Instead of
Yes.
shitting rainbows, it's a
The
T-Rex that's
dinosaurs
vomiting.
vomiting rainbows, yes. Pretty much.
Oh, oh man, that is awesome. We've been here talking for a while now, and you make this reference, and I just happened to look over to the screen and see that picture there. I was like, that is amazing. For those
Yes.
who are simply listening to the audio right now, there is a picture up there with a with a T-Rex that is vomiting a rainbow, and it's fucking awesome. Oh my god, I love that. Um, so out of all these years and everything, all these different calls, these different experiences, everything that you've been doing, and I'm sure there are a lot of them, but is there a call? And of course, especially only talk about this if you feel comfortable, but a call that kind of sticks with you.
I mean, I feel like with
Hmm.
every dispatcher, there are a few calls that stick with them. Um, Most notably, I would say it happened when I worked at my first center.
Hmm.
Um, and so it was this woman. She was home alone. She was in her 60s and she was having chest pain. Because she was home alone and it coded as a high priority call, I stayed on the phone with her until the ambulance got there. Um, Normally, our ambulance responses at that center were pretty quick. We were in there from the time of call to on scene within 5 or 6 minutes,
Hmm.
which is, especially a lot of EMS calls, it takes a while because they got to leave the station and all that. But this ambulance was coming from a little bit farther away. So it was about a 10-minute response. So after you finish all of your EMD and you're just sitting on the phone with them, sometimes people like don't want to talk and they just want to sit in silence until the ambulance gets there. Excuse me. But sometimes they want to talk and they want to tell you stories, and it'll help calm them down a lot of times if they start telling you about their life and about their family and all this stuff. So she told me all about her kids and her grandkids, and she asked if I had any kids, and I laughed and I was like, no, but I had a childhood dog. And I told her a funny story about my dog. And we were like talking and like genuinely like laughing, like we were friends on the phone, just having a conversation. Then she got really serious and she said to me, honey, how old are you? And I laughed and I was like very proud. I was like, I just turned 22 2 weeks ago. And she's like, oh my God. She's like, you're so young. And she's like, you're so young and you're so kind. Never lose that kindness. And I was kind of like humbled and like taken aback because like here's this lady with chest pain like complimenting me on a 911. And I was just kind of like, okay. And she was like, promise me you'll never lose your kindness. And I was like, I promise. And then she died.
Wow.
Right after I promised her, I heard the phone fall, followed by her body. And I screamed into the phone. I was like so shocked. Like we were just talking. I screamed into the phone and I was like, ma'am, if you can hear me, push a button, make a noise, do anything. If you can hear me, make a noise. And it was just silence. So I told the dispatcher, like, I have an open line 911. I think she's unconscious. The crew got on scene, and I heard them call CPR in progress, call for a second truck, and she did not make it. So every time, every day, when I sit at the desk, I think about her and how I couldn't save her. There was nothing I could have done that would have caused her to live. But what I did do was bring her joy and happiness in the last moments of her life. And I think about that every time I sit the desk and every time I get annoyed with a caller, and I try to harness what she said and honor her by being kind every day to everybody I deal with.
Damn.
Yeah.
That is very, very powerful. And it's funny how when we're taking these calls, we're helping folks, but in a way, sometimes they help us as well. And that's what it sounds like with this call.
Yeah.
Because it's stuck with you ever since then. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. What a lesson to learn, and just to have that. I mean, there's a lot of conversations that you have with folks that you end up being that last voice that they heard. And, others who don't have the same, um, or just might not have the same compassion or whatever, those folks sometimes have to live with the fact that maybe they didn't speak to the best of their ability, and that was the last thing that somebody heard. But here, you were talking, you were being human, You were listening to this person, helping them, and like you said, it was like you were friends, and that was the last thing she heard after you promised her to always keep that kindness. And
Yeah.
from every time that I've spoken to you, you are super kind, and
Thank
you
you.
have definitely done that, and I can see you doing that with every call. So, wow, thank you so much for sharing that story. Um, that story, do you also share that with a lot of the trainees that come in as well? As because there's a lot of times where, it's changed a lot now, and maybe it's still the same way
Mhm.
in some places, but there are times when you get people in, and it's sometimes almost sugar coated, and people aren't truthful or fully
Mhm.
truthful with some of the stuff that they're going to deal with. And I would rather people know what they're getting into right off the bat,
Mhm.
and have someone who's going to stay, than find out later and maybe freeze up on a call or something. I want people to know this. So stories like that, when you have trainees coming in and everything, and training, I can hear it and see it and feel it from you. Like you said, it's your passion. It's a passion of yours. Do you share this story with those as well?
So that specific story, actually very few people have ever heard. Um, but I do definitely share other stories and make sure that everybody knows the reality of what exactly we're doing. And so I try, like, in my training, I try not to make it like all about, like, oh, everything I've done, because it's not like
Right.
necessarily like, oh, I'm the only person that has ever taken any of these calls. So I do share a little bit about what I do, but I also utilize other tools. For instance, this most recent hire group, I played the seminar that you and Nathan Lee did,
Mhm.
The Power of Choice, which is available on YouTube, guys, and it's free. So you should show your trainees. Um, but it we talked about, the different choices that the dispatchers made that day, and how if they had chose differently, how Denise Amber Lee would still be alive. And so I do definitely bring in aspects like that, and I play real live, well, not live calls, but real calls for them, and we talk about the hard things. I just try not to make it super centered around, like, oh, I'm so great, I've done all these great calls type thing.
Yes. No, that is excellent. You always want to share just a bunch of different things, right? Because
Yeah.
it's all a team effort as well, and so that's good. And oh man, yeah, that power of choice one is a really
Mm,
good one as well. So yes, please make sure to check it out if you've
yes.
not done so. Um, so I want to segue now, as
All
we've
right.
heard a lot about you, and which, man, what a story. Just everything that you've done, and that you will continue to do, because I can see you doing a lot of big things in this industry. But recently, you were, or you are, the very first recipient of the Fireworks Scholarship given out by Nine Wonder Women Inc. in between Within the Trenches Media, but especially the 360-degree dispatcher with Joe
Mhm.
Serio. You were chosen, and this past week, you got a chance to go to the Mayan Ranch and be with a group of people that are like-minded individuals rather, and it was just all week full of different
Mm.
sessions, leadership, mental health and wellness, resilience, all types of things, power storytelling, just a lot of different stuff. And you kind of mentioned it in the beginning, but here we are again. And what was this experience like?
It was it was amazing. So what happened with the fireworks scholarship was, so my boss, Christy, I love her. She is like the biggest supporter of, like, training and getting people to, like, everything they need. And she's always sending me, like, little articles and things that she finds at like 3 in the morning, and she's like, check this out, what do you think of this? And I'm like, Christy, go to bed.
Right.
But she one of the things that she sent me at like 3 in the morning was this scholarship application. She was
Mhm.
like, you should apply for this would be good, like you'd be like, this would be great for you. So I looked at it and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna apply. But I never thought I would get it, so it was like super humbling that like I actually got it. But anyway, the whole week, it was one of the hardest weeks on my brain of my life. I felt like every conversation we were having was important.
Mhm.
Whether we were talking about leadership, talking about owning our own shit, having self-reflection. We did a lot of like self-evaluating yourself to figure out like, are you truly being the best you can be, and having that real like discussion with yourself, like, no, I'm actually failing myself in this aspect, and why haven't I reached this goal that I've had forever, and really figuring out how to make those steps. I remember one of the most like mind-blowing things that Joe said, because I have really poor time management, um, was he said that time management is a myth. You have poor self-management. And I was like, damn, he's right. Like,
You're like, oh, hit me right in the heart.
yeah, like I need to be way more strict with myself about how I'm using my time.
Yeah.
So I'm really, that's like my main takeaway from that right now that I'm trying to focus on is being more strict with myself with my time. But every single conversation, whether, even when we were hanging out after class, I felt like it wasn't like we were just gossiping about like random things. Like people were having like these intense, deep conversations about where they feel like they can excel and different things that they want to do and different ideas. And um, I got a lot of great ideas from other centers. I told a few of the people about how one of the things my center wants to start, one of the things we were talking about all week was leaders are readers.
Mhm.
And how one of the things my center wants to do is we were talking about in our little supervisor group um, doing like a book club and reading these like leadership, time management type books and having discussions at our supervisor meetings about what we read and what we took from it. So a few people like actually wrote down that idea that we have, and I wrote down ideas that other centers have, and it was just really, really great all around.
Yeah, that's probably one of the best things as well, right? Is seeing or being there with folks that are in different types of centers as well as
Mhm.
locations, and then sharing ideas, taking them back and putting them to use in your center, or tweaking it for the environment that you're in.
Mhm.
And then we're all also all part of a private group that was just for our class, and you can go back and continue those friendships that were built there through just
Mhm.
conversation, and some hard conversation, like you were saying, self-reflection. When you're going through things, you don't always want to admit that certain things are you, right? Like
Mhm.
you don't want to be, you don't want to have to look in the mirror and be like, oh shit, maybe it's me.
Yeah.
and and that's a hard thing, right? So like you're
Yeah.
saying, and me sitting in back with all the other speakers, or instructors rather, and listening to this, like you can feel it. But also, I'm writing stuff down too. I'm like, oh man, like I could use this, and
Yeah.
talk about different things like this too. And it was just an all around, for me myself, a great experience too. And
Mhm.
to be able to be there to do, um to speak with all of you, and take you through the roller coaster that is Imagine Listening. It was really good to have all of you share a lot of your stories, but all of that built up over the week. and just everything that you learned. It was awesome to be there, but also for you, just perfect recipient. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Super proud of you, man. There's so much good stuff. And then top secret thing that you and I talked about, which I
Yes.
won't say here, but top secret, it'll come out soon enough, and I'm excited for that as well. Um,
Me too.
but
I already
I'm
have
just,
all of the ideas.
do you? Oh yes, good. Oh, that makes me so happy. That is awesome. That is excellent. And just seeing you, interact with everyone there, and also one of those days you were not feeling that great,
No.
but even though you weren't feeling that great, holy shit, you ended up showing up for I don't know how many first few hours in the morning before you split to go rest a little bit. But man, that is the kind of and I was telling Sarah, I said that's the kind of person that you definitely want to be, one, the recipient of a scholarship like this, but to be in a leadership type event all week, because that shows your determination and how much you really wanted to be there to learn.
Mhm.
So I applaud
Thank
you
you.
again. I applaud you again.
Thank you. Yeah, I got some sort of stomach bug, but I actually only missed the end of one of Sarah's things
Mhm.
and the beginning of another seminar. And then like everything else I was there for. Cause I was like, I'm gonna do this. Like,
Yes. Well done. Well done. And no, that was just it was really good. I do have to I do want to ask really quick before we go into the wrap up of
mhm,
this episode. So a part of the process for those um applying for this scholarship was a 1,000 word essay. So what I want to ask though is what was that like for you going into this? Like there was some requirements there and a few things that were mentioned that were looking for in this essay. But when you started writing, I mean, I can only imagine that you were just writing with your heart.
yeah. So I've always been very passionate in helping people. And making a difference. I know it's super corny because I feel like every dispatcher is like, became a dispatcher to help people, but
Right. Like,
like, yeah, like
yeah.
it's great. Um, but I really like from a young age have always volunteered and, help people and tried to make a difference in people's lives. So I wrote about that. But I also wrote about a brief period of time where I lost that
Mhm.
and trying to find it again. Um, so a few years ago, I won't get into too many details about it, but
Sure.
I took a 911 call for a baby not breathing. It actually wasn't even my call. What happened was I was going to the bathroom and I'm walking across the dispatch floor, and the girl that was sitting next to me picked up the 911 and something like told me to stop. So I like stopped and I turned and looked at her and her face was white and she just like holds the phone out. And I'm like, honey, what is it? And she's like, it's a baby not breathing. I can't do this. I can't do this, Julie. So I like immediately take the phone. It was a toddler who, due to negligent actions by the father, wasn't breathing. And the dad's actually, it was so negligent that the dad's actually doing time for it. Um, but I was on the phone with this guy who did this negligent thing and now had this baby that wasn't breathing and he was calling. So I had to give CPR instructions to him to try to save his baby. And the baby actually lived. It was like, so like, it's one of those things that like everybody was like, well, you should be happy. Like the baby lived.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, the baby lived, but like this horrible thing still happened to the baby because of this negligence of the father. And there are so many people that can't have babies. And like, what makes like this guy more deserving than the people that like literally cannot have babies?
Right.
So it wasn't my first baby not breathing call. So I kind of like ended up going into like this anger tailspin. And I was diagnosed with PTSD from dispatching. And so I wrote about that and being diagnosed with PTSD. And just how like it's made me grow as a person. But also made me realize that like there are so many other veteran dispatchers that would have looked at that girl in panic and been like, it's your call, you take it. And like kept walking to go to the bathroom. So I try as a supervisor and as a leader to be that helping person when people need the help. And I wrote about how all of that and how this training would really help me become the leader that my dispatchers deserve.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on this episode. This has been awesome to have you on and learn so much about you. But as we're going into this wrap up, this final question.
All right.
For anyone who is thinking about applying for the next firework scholarship, what advice would you give?
I would tell them to be honest, be yourself, and write something that you're truly passionate about. Because if you feel passionately and if you feel strongly about something, it will come out better on paper and more fluid on paper.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you
Thank
so
you.
very much. The whole entire experience, just everything. It was awesome to be out there with you. And, we hit up a restaurant and everything when we first got into Texas.
Yeah. Hit it on the way out too.
That's right. We hit it on the way out too. It was so good. And it was just a good time. So thank you for being on this episode, for sharing your story and for the job that you do. And again, congratulations for
Thank
being the
you.
first fireworks scholarship recipient. It was really, really awesome. So I will be right back here with you in just one moment. For those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches Podcast. This episode has been sponsored by InDigital, Rapid Deploy, as well as Carbine. And as always, a big shout out to patrons for everything. If you want to become a patron as well and support us, you can hook us up over here at patreon.com/WTT podcast. There are bonus episodes, Singing Badly in My Car, which I have a whole shit ton that is going to be coming out here pretty soon. So look out for that. Also, a perk for patrons only are audio versions of the DRT, which is the Dispatchers Roundtable, as well as Open Mic Live that I do every single Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern time on social media, unless I'm traveling out of state. Then I do a late night one on Saturday, usually at 10 or 11 at night. But either way, you can check us out here, patreon.com/WTT podcast. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as Twitter, and you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.